As car guys, we like to drool over the super fast, super powerful but also super expensive sports cars. But for mere mortals like us, most of these exclusive supercars are really just to line our walls as posters. Chances are, you and I would probably never own one, or even get anywhere close to seeing some of them. What you'll probably be seeing more though are cars like this, the Toyota Corolla Cross Hybrid. And if you can just forget about sports cars for a moment and put on our big boy pants, you'll quickly start to realize that these family SUVs, especially this one here, they're actually pretty decent cars. I mean, there's a reason why they're getting more and more popular by the day. The Corolla Cross isn't exactly a new model, even here in Malaysia. It was launched here sometime last year, but as part of the 2022 updates, Toyota has now brought production of the crossover into Malaysia and given us a new range-topping variant with a hybrid powertrain. But because it's also technically just a new variant, that also means that it doesn't look all that much different. I mean, sure, there are some subtle touches to help differentiate it as the hybrid model, but by and large, it's essentially unchanged from the regular petrol-powered 1.8V. I do really like the blue accents in the headlights, however. It's almost like a light eyeshadow makeup for the car to help bring out a little bit more character. As a whole, I call the design of the Corolla Cross safe, as in it doesn't try to do anything too ambitious. Rather, Toyota has opted for a design that is most likely to appeal to the mass market with nothing that truly stands out. It's not handsome, but does it work? Well, I think so. Except for the rear, which to be honest, I think might just be a little bit too bland. It's almost as if the designers ran out of budget when they're designing the back here and just clicked on autocomplete or something, because it completely lacks any sort of defining character. The taillights especially, I think just looks a bit too simple in appearance. And the slim horizontal layout doesn't really help with the whole squash look of the back, which I think is primarily caused by this huge black plastic trim on the bumper. And while we're still at the back here, the way they tried to jam the Corolla badge into the trim here just makes it look off-centered. At least you do get the bigger wheels here that help fill out the large angular wheel wells, and the lighting system is also a lot better looking than the frankly low-rent ones of the entry-level 1.8G. The interior design is also very familiar, and that's because the entire dashboard is essentially lifted out directly from the Corolla sedan. And just like the outside, nothing really stands out, but at the same time, it's also inoffensive. And in terms of equipment, you do actually get quite a lot on the new range topper, with modern amenities such as the large screen on the semi-digital instrument cluster, the massive 9-inch touchscreen infotainment display, 360-degree surround view monitor, a built-in front and rear dashcam, dual zone climate control, and even a wireless charging pad. But it's when you start to use many of these things and look at it in closer detail that you realize many of its flaws that perhaps shouldn't be overlooked. Take the infotainment display for example. I mean, sure, it looks really clear, and in terms of software functionality, it's fine. But when you want to use the Apple CarPlay or Android Auto connectivity, the only place for you to plug it in is actually on the head unit itself, which means your cable will be dangling down the dashboard, which not only does it look bad, it also might be potentially dangerous too. And the buttons at the side here, they're all touch sensitive, including the volume control. That by itself is really bad enough, but they're made so small that realistically when you're driving, you'll never be able to use them unless you take your eyes off the road for a good few seconds. The interior dome light is positioned so far back that it's really hard to see anything in front here at all at night. And the screen here on the instrument cluster, yeah, it's big, but it also doesn't really make use of all of the screen real estate with the amount of information and customization available. Especially when you put it into this digital speedometer mode, it just looks really empty, and at that point, do you really even need that big of a screen anymore? And don't get me started about this foot-operated parking brake.
Sure, it's something you can probably get used to, but it just feels wrong in a modern car in 2022. It's not all bad news, however, because as a family car, it does get quite a few things right.
And most of them are actually here in the back seats. First of all, the seats are actually really comfortable, and in this reclined backrest mode, I can honestly see myself sitting here on long distance journeys for hours without any complaints. Most importantly though, the seats here actually work for adults, unlike its chief competitor, the Honda HR-V, which in that car, you'll definitely be rubbing your head against the headliner if you so much as try sitting up straight.
With the Corolla Cross's bigger chassis, the shoulder room back here is also sufficient for even 3 adult passengers. And the knee room, well, I'd say it's pretty much just as good as the HR-V.
And when you add all of those up, plus the larger window apertures, it really does help lessen the claustrophobic feeling when you're sitting in the back here, especially when you compare it to all of its other rivals. And well, the rear aircon blowers, that's just the cherry on top. Speaking of space, the battery pack is actually hidden underneath the rear seats, so the cargo room here at the back actually hasn't been affected by the change of powertrains. You still get the same 440 litres, just about the same as the HR-V. The HR-V also has the signature magic seats, which this doesn't. So in terms of flexibility of taller and wider items, the Honda still has a win. Well, let's go for a drive, shall we?
If you've ever driven any modern Toyota cars, you already know that it handles really well. And the Corolla Cross Hybrid here is no exception too, and that is once again thanks to the TNGA chassis, even if it has a simpler torsion beam suspension at the back.
And it doesn't feel all that much different compared to the non-hybrid models, because despite the additional battery pack, it only weighs 25 kilograms more than the non-hybrid variants. And the battery is also placed quite low in the cabin, which means your overall center of gravity is not actually affected that much too. And all of that just means that it still gives you the same confidence to really fling it into corners, and the car will just handle it without breaking a sweat. And don't forget, this is still a pretty tall riding crossover too. On that note, let's be a bit honest here. You're not buying this car for sporty driving. I mean, don't get me wrong, you'll still happily carve up the back roads on your weekend drives, but the headlining feature of this car is literally right in its name.
The hybrid powertrain underneath the bonnet is made up of a 1.8-litre Atkinson cycle naturally aspirated petrol engine, an electric motor, plus a small electric battery at the back. And all of them work together to send 122 horsepower to the front wheels via an eCVT gearbox.
If all of that sounds a bit too complicated for you, well, don't worry, because the car just does all of the hybrid stuff automatically. And the system is actually really smart, switching between the electric and engine drive depending on your driving conditions. And that means you don't have to get involved into changing your driving modes, the amount of regenerative braking, or even charging the car itself. In fact, Toyota doesn't even want you to know what's happening behind the scenes. It doesn't even show you your engine revs, and instead is replaced by this sort of energy usage meter kind of thing. And the only way for you to know if the engine is on is to listen carefully for it, or if the small little EV indicator is turned off. And you actually really do have to listen for it, because the switch between electric and engine drive is almost completely seamless. And in normal driving circumstances, and especially on the highway, it's really actually quite hard to distinguish between the two.
For the most part, the powertrain remains incredibly quiet even when the engine kicks in. It's only when you floor the accelerator that the engine starts to sound a little rough, but even then, it's really not that loud.
And all of that, together with the supple suspension and soundproofing, just add up to a supremely comfortable and quiet driving experience. Especially for those of you who have to go through traffic every day to and fro from work, there's just something really soothing about inching forward in traffic without any sort of noise and vibrations. The hybrid powertrain here delivers one of the best fuel consumption figures I've ever seen. I've had the car for about a week now, and I've achieved 6 litres per 100 km. And that's just me driving it like a normal car, with some spirited driving here and there too. Toyota says that the Corolla Cross Hybrid can achieve a figure of 4.3 litres per 100 km, although you really shouldn't look at the official figures that much. I've seen it regularly dip down to 5.2, 5.3 litres per 100 km, and that's even without me trying to hypermile it. On a car this size, that's just really impressive. The onboard computer here estimates a driving range of about 600 km for a full tank of fuel. That by itself is really quite impressive, but the full tank here is actually just 36 litres, which is smaller than a Myvi. And that means it's actually quite realistic to take your family on a weekend road trip from KL to Ipoh and back on just less than 60 ringgit worth of fuel.
The sharp-eyed among you might notice that the 122 horsepower output is actually lower than the regular 1.8 litre variants, and even the previous generation of the Toyota hybrid system.
But when you're actually driving the car, it doesn't really feel that way. In fact, I think in normal driving circumstances, you'll rarely ever find yourself feeling underpowered. Personally, I've only ever experienced it once, and it was on a pretty steep hill climb, which for some reason the electric motors kind of hesitated to kick in. I'm guessing it's because I've been driving it pretty hard and I've probably already depleted batteries. But aside from that one time, overtaking in this car actually feels easier and more eager than the petrol-powered variants.
Toyota says that the lower output figure is an effort to reduce fuel consumption, but they've also made improvements to their hybrid system to still provide better real-world performance.
There's no official acceleration data for this car, but according to Toyota's own internal testing, the hybrid variant here is actually over 2 seconds faster when you're accelerating from 0 to 50 km per hour. If you're driving on normal roads like a regular car buyer, well, I'd actually argue that the lower speed acceleration is actually more important than your 0 to 100 test. The Corolla Cross Hybrid is not an exciting car, but normal car buyers aren't necessarily looking for excitement anyway. For most people, a car just needs to be safe, comfortable, spacious and affordable. And I think that the Corolla Cross actually ticks almost all of those boxes, and the hybrid powertrain just completes the package to make it a very good all-rounder for its target audience, which, as we've mentioned just now, is actually most people. If you're looking for a family crossover that's spacious, cheap to run, and has all of the modern creature comforts to make your daily work commute better, then the Corolla Cross Hybrid does get a strong recommendation for us.
Although now that the all-new Honda HR-V is here, you might want to check that out before you pull the trigger. That is, if you're okay to wait up to a whole year to get your car.
For more information on the Toyota Corolla Cross Hybrid, do log on to AutoBuzz.my. If you enjoyed the video, click the like button, comment and share it with your friends. And if you didn't, well, tell us why in the comments below. Also, click on the subscribe button if you haven't already. And of course, that little bell icon for all of the notifications to our latest videos.